Now, the Dutertes have an entrenched political dynasty. The feud with the Marcoses is causing them problems, though, and now her father is in jail. Would these events have happened if the president wasn't at war with his deputies?
With the arrest of Rodrigo, when they were allies, Marcos himself said he would block the ICC. Now, note that the ICC does not have any power to arrest anyone. They need the participation of countries in order to arrest suspects. So, for example, Netanyahu has an arrest warrant against him. Putin has an arrest warrant against him. Their countries are not giving them up. So if it weren't for Marcos Jr., Duterte would still be a free man.
As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority. The ICC claims near universal jurisdiction over the citizens of every country, violating all principles of justice, fairness, and due process.
The ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel, and Mr. Khan's actions will not stop us from waging our just war against Hamas.
In relation to the former president, it's clear from the outside that there's been some breakdown in the relationship. I mean, do you intend now to invite the ICC to the Philippines to conduct its investigation?
No, that would be a political move. We do not play politics with jurisdiction and sovereignty. We do not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC, and we view it as a threat to sovereignty, simply because the ICC was formed to provide justice to areas where there is no judiciary, where there is no court system, where there is no police, where there is no peace and order. And that's not the Philippines. The plane carrying former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte took off at 11:03 p.m. this evening and exited Philippine airspace. The plane is en route to The Hague in the Netherlands, allowing the former president to face charges of crimes against humanity in relation to his bloody war on drugs. The former president was earlier placed in government custody at Villamor Air Base after his common-law wife, Hanilet Avancenia, and members of his entourage arrived at 9:20 this morning from Hong Kong on Cathay Pacific flight number CX-907. Mr. Duterte was arrested in compliance with our commitments to Interpol. Hours before his arrival, Interpol Manila received an official copy of the ICC warrant. This prompted the Prosecutor General of the Department of Justice to serve the warrant. Interpol asked for help, and we obliged because we have commitments to the Interpol, which we have to fulfill. If we don't do that, they will no longer help us with other cases involving Filipino fugitives abroad. This is what the international community expects of us as the leader of a democratic country that is part of the community of nations. The arrest that we did today was in compliance with our commitments to Interpol. It just so happened that came from ICC. But it's not because it came from ICC. It's because it came from Interpol.
Ito ang kauna-unahang pagkakataon na ang warrant of arrest was honored by a member state. Samantalang diffusion pa lang to, wala pang compliance review, wala pang ibinibigay sa secretariat ng Interpol, walang task force yung Interpol at walang kaalam-alam yung commissioner ng Interpol. Ang sabi nga ng Interpol, si Presidente Duterte ay hindi wanted ng Interpol. Wanted daw siya ng ICC. Pinadala lang daw sa kanila. As a matter of fact, under Article 97, Section 4 of Interpol's own rules on the processing of data, it is very clear that there are so many requirements before any action can be taken.
I don't want you to make a judgment sa Interpol, no? If any foreign entity, no, comes to us and asks for an arrest, is it non-cooperation with them? If we say, may provisional arrest, we have him in custody, but a Philippine judge has to decide whether or not we can turn him over to you.
If I may, Your Honor, international conventions actually respect compliance with the domestic laws. Even the Rome Statute, in the cooperation, the requirement is application of the laws of the country, of the custodial state. So it's up to the custodial state how to comply. There is no issue that we should comply with all these international obligations. That's not the dispute. The dispute is how to comply. And the manner of compliance is governed primarily, of course, by the Constitution, the highest law of the land.
And that's precisely why the diffusion notice stated provisional arrest or extradition, because so this is the parallelism of what I want to make. If the ICC knows na pwedeng provisional arrest or pwedeng extradition, they give it sa Interpol, hindi naman magagalit ang Interpol kung nagbigay silang red notice at ang sagot mo sa Interpol, we have him under custody but we cannot release him to you unless a Philippine court so orders or unless we give him enough time to seek legal remedy. Because of course, if the person doesn't seek legal remedy, para na rin yung sinurrender.
But when it comes to them going into the country, kung gusto nila pumasok dito upang manghuhuli at magpasagawa ng warrant na kanila pong na-issue po siguro ng ICC pagdating ng panahon, kailangan po itong dumaan sa ating court system. Ito po ay kinakailangan ng isang action to enforce a warrant, action to enforce a judgment. Kailangan po dumaan yan sa ating court system. Kaya hindi ho namin pakikialaman kasi yan po trabaho ng Interpol kung talagang gusto nilang habulin yung tao na nasasaktal. Yung sabihin natin, nag-issue po na warrant of arrest ng ICC, gusto mo enforce ng Interpol dito, pero para ho ito ay matuloy at hindi ho magkaroon ng kasuhan, kinakailangan pumunta muna sila sa korte natin. There's some things that the Supreme Court would be looking at if what was alleged in the crime would have happened if we were still members of the ICC. That is one of the things that can be of importance to the courts when they do enforce a warrant, or if they will actually allow a warrant to be served in our country from an international tribunal.
Ayun. Napakaliwanag at napakaganda ng paliwanag ni Secretary Boying na sa ICC man yan, Interpol man yan, dadaan yan sa Korteng Pilipino.
Ma'am, ano yan eh? Ang general rule talaga, pag may foreign judgment, you have to enforce it in court. However, ito hong nangyaring ito, ang ginamit po namin dito, Section 17 ng Republic Act.
9851.
9851. Pwede ko hong basahin, ma'am? Can I read the provision into the record? Put it on, into the record. In the interest of justice, the relevant Philippine authorities may dispense with the investigation or prosecution of a crime punishable under this act if another court or international tribunal is already conducting the investigation or undertaking the prosecution of such crime. Instead, the authorities may surrender or extradite suspected or accused persons in the Philippines to the appropriate international court, if any, or to another state pursuant to the applicable extradition laws and treaties. That is Section 17 of Republic Act 9851. So yes. Ito pa yung option na sinasabi ko kanina.
All due respect to our hardworking, brilliant Secretary of Justice, I beg to disagree. Purely on legal grounds, again, constitutional, doctrine of constitutional supremacy, whatever right that is granted by the Constitution cannot be diminished or be in derogation, cannot be diminished or lessened or stripped away by any statute. So if the Constitution guarantees that if a person is to be expelled from the Philippine territory by whatever means, a lawful order of the court is required. That grant that grant of the Constitution, that protection of the Constitution, cannot be lessened by any statute. So that in that case, 9851. So we have to interpret 9851 in accordance with the broad protection of the Constitution, which means that if you will surrender without judicial proceedings, that would be a violation. So there will be only a very narrow instance, there will be limited instances when surrender can be valid without judicial process. Surrender without judicial proceedings might amount to a violation of the liberty of abode that is guaranteed by Section 6 of the Bill of Rights. The liberty of abode cannot be impaired without a lawful order of the court. That's the text of the Constitution. Now, this constitutional protection is a barrier for any government action that would simply compel an individual to change his residence. So to compel a person, to expel a person from his country of residence without a lawful court order by excluding the judicial process might amount to a violation of the liberty of abode. Now, surrender as an option under Section 17 is applicable only in very narrow situations. One is when the person to be arrested has already voluntarily surrendered to the custody of the national government, in which case that negates the necessity of the extradition process. The other option is when the person to be arrested is actually an alien, in which case there's no need to go through the extrajudicial process. It's only a deportation process which does not involve a court proceedings. So in those two instances, surrender without court proceedings would be possible. Other than those proceedings, it would be very difficult to maintain that is sanctioned by the Constitution.
So
Thank
ang
you, Your Honor.
sinasabi po ninyo, dalawa lang pagkakataon na pwede mag-surrender. Kung yung mismong akusado at arestado ang nagsusumite sa pamahalaan, yun, pwede yun.
Yes po.
Kusa niya yun.
Yes.
Ikalawa, kapag banyaga,
Yes po.
di naman Pilipino,
Yes po.
deport, executive action yun.
Yes po.
Mabilis, walang kailangan na korte-korte.
Yes po.
So yun lang, wala na pong ibang exception, wala na pong ibang sitwasyon kung saan pwedeng surrender. Kasi pinagpipilitan na sinurrender, sinuko ang Pangulong Duterte ng pamahalaan sa Interpol. Yun ang pagkaintindi ko sa sinasabi kanina. Sinasabi ninyo, hindi po pwede yun. Dalawang pagkakataon lang ang po pwede isuko ang isang Pilipino. Yung isa pa nga, hindi sa Pilipino. Attorney Medina po.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I stand by my statement. There may be possibilities that surrender can happen in other situations, but certainly surrender of a person necessarily requires the lawful order of the court. And this requirement is consistent with the policy of the Constitution that whenever there's a deprivation of liberty, court intervention, judicial proceedings, judicial process is a requirement because the right to liberty is placed in an exalted status in our constitutional system. Hindi po pwedeng, the Constitution does not contemplate exclusion of the court process in depriving a person of his right to liberty.
Kung hindi pwedeng isuko ang isang Pilipino na hindi pumapayag, hindi naman voluntary, ang ibig mo sabihin, ang iba pang pagkakataon, extradition na.
Yes,
That's the only legal process to enforce surrender to the ICC. I-extradite na kapag Pilipino ka. Tama po ba?
I agree, Madam Chair. Thank you. And extradition is a judicial proceedings. It involves judicial proceedings po.
Okay.
May I
At
respond?
maliwanag din dito, maski yung Interpol mismo, sinasaad na kinakailangan provisional arrest, extradition to be applied for in conformity with national laws. Sinasabi nga sa ating konstitusyon, sa ating Korte Suprema lamang at sa mga iba't iba pang korte. Kasama pa ba yung korte sa ICC?
Do we, in this room, do we all agree that if there's conflict between international law and our constitution will prevail?
Yes, Your Honor, that's the doctrine of constitutional supremacy.
You agree, SOJ? No? Yeah. If there's conflict, di ba? Kasi sinabi naman sa Constitution that international law forms part of the land of the law. So if there's no conflict, wala tayong problema. Klaro kasi extradition. So sa extradition, mako-comply mo yung due process sa Section 1 because you will, tama ba ako, you will be brought before a judge?
Yes po. Thank you, Senator. Yes, I agree. Basically, the principle involved here is due process. I think a lot of commentators have already pointed out the requirement of adherence to the principle of due process. So whatever it is that the government is action is taking that would deprive a person of life, liberty, or process or property, it has to go through a certain process. It's called procedural due process. If it's a crime, it's a criminal due process. It's a procedural due process requires opportunity to be heard, reasonable opportunity to be heard by and in an impartial or before an impartial tribunal.
And in criminal law, both procedural and substantial due process are essential. Not only
Yes,
important,
yes.
but are essential,
Yes,
diba?
yes,
Because
yeah.
in let's say, other cases, kung magkamali ng konti sa procedure, it's repairable. Pero sa criminal law, na-accuse ka na mali, kambal mo pala yon or nung pinasa yung batas na yon, hindi pa pala crime, and then you weren't informed, fatal yon. So much so, that meron ngang doctrine of the poisonous tree, di ba? That if yung evidence that were taken from you were illegally obtained, hindi pwedeng gamitin against you. Is my recollection of the law. You're a professor, so you continually review this. I don't continually review you do this, no, but I should, of course.
I agree, Senator.
Okay.
The rule is the exclusionary rule for violation of the right against
Yes.
unreasonable searches.
I was just
seizures.
emphasizing how important the procedural due process is because my next question, sinabi mo nga reasonable time, di ba? So
reasonable opportunity po.
reasonable opportunity, which includes reasonable time, right?
Opo.
Because even if you can run to court, if you give the court 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, it's not for us because wala namang Supreme Court regulation or batas na nagsasabing the writ of habeas corpus has to be issued in 12 hours or 1 day or etc. Diba? So you give reasonable time. So can I just interject one question kay General Torre? So sir, when you read the Miranda rights, did you explain the nature and cause of the of the crime that he's being accused of?
Yes, sir. It is on record and caught on video, sir.
Yeah. So how did you read to him yung nature and cause? It's sa warrant or you?
Yes, sir. I read it
narrate-
from the warrant, sir. It
From
was
the warrant.
extracted from the warrant by the DOJ.
So did you or any of the people who were serving the warrant explain to him the elements of the crime?
Yes, sir. The whole warrant was actually given to them.
So just because it's simple naman, what are the elements of the crime against humanity na may murder? If you explain to him, then you can explain to me, diba? So what's the elements?
During the time, sir, it was not me who attempted the reading of the rights. It was the Prosecutor General.
Yes, sir. But sabi mo, you know the elements of the crime.
I read to him in toto what was written
Yes.
on the warrant, sir.
I read the warrant. Wala dun yung elements of the crime.
We did not say that I know the elements, sir. I just
Yes.
read to him exactly
So-
the charges in accordance with what is written in the
Yes,
warrant.
sir. Since this is a foreign court, and it's not even in the Rome Statute, yung elements. It was passed later on. So ang point ko, was the accused, in this case former president, aware of what he was being accused of? So I'll stop there, sir. Factual lang naman, and I take your answer that it was the warrant was there, it was read to him, and there are different. I won't go to them now. I'm just making the point that even if you serve the warrant, kung hindi niya alam at hindi alam ng lawyer niya, how do you expect him to run to court to get legal remedy? So going back, Attorney Alexis, sir, so is the ability to seek legal remedy part of due process? Meaning, if you deny me, if you're accusing me of something, my warrant of arrest, and you don't allow me to go to Philippine courts, is that denying you due process?
Absolutely, Your Honor. Without casting any aspersion on the character or competence of the officials involved.
Yeah, I'm asking a general question. I think
the question
SOJ
that
naman
you
is
posed, yes.
listening and they will answer. So going back to surrender, pero hindi siya binigyan ng enough time or enough opportunity before a Philippine judge aren't we denying him due process? Because pagdating dun sa foreign court, as SOJ said correctly, and I agree with him, iba language, iba procedure, and everything. So isn't a Filipino citizen, doesn't he have the right under the Constitution to be judged first by Philippine law before he's brought out to a foreign country or to an international tribunal to face what their interpretation of the law is?
If I may answer,
Yes.
Your Honor, if you look at the consistent policy of the Constitution, when there is a deprivation of liberty, the consistent policy of the Constitution is to involve the judiciary. The exclusion, complete exclusion of the judiciary in the deprivation of liberty of any citizen is anathema to the principles of the Constitution. And you can see that in the different provisions of the Constitution. You can see that in the requirements for the warrant of arrest, due process, liberty of abode, criminal proceeding, criminal due process, even in the period when the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus is suspended, the Constitution mandates the government to file charges